Good evening.
Oh boy, everyone please forgive the first 20 minutes of this video where you can't really see what I'm drawing up here because I did not realize my camera had moved. We are off to a great start. Happy 2024. Hello everyone, Adrian here and welcome to episode 2 of Blood In, Ink Out. And we'll call this my first real episode of this series. Episode 1 is really just an introduction with me rambling. This is the first real episode. I'm actually doing some artwork, as you can see here. I've actually already started it, guys. I'm way ahead of you. Yeah, I actually was thinking, it being New Year's. By the way, hope everyone's having a great holiday season. And I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year's, and I'm actually recording this on New Year's Eve, and I was thinking, hey, I should do being New Year's, I should do, what are my 2024 goals, art goals, or what have you, but I wanted to start somewhere else first, this being the first real episode, and, so, this being Blood In, Ink Out, what better place to start than with ink? Right? Ink, this inky black stuff here. So, gonna be talking about inking while I am inking this Spectre piece here. As you can see, I've already started. I did record something a bit earlier while I was drawing this, but I think I might just scrap that, so I think the video starts here, where I've actually already kind of done most of the just outline of Spectre, but still lots of ground to cover here, guys. I don't know how much of it I'll actually get done in this video. We'll see. But I did more or less do the outline. Nothing special. We'll get into. This isn't gonna be any sort of tutorial video. This isn't gonna be a deep dive on my inking process. This is just going to be, talking about what is inking, my appreciation, my growing appreciation for the art of inking, of drawing with ink. Because really, what is inking? Is it just applying ink to paper or some other kind of surface, I suppose? Yeah. But when it comes to comic book inking, which is really, what we're doing here, it's much more than that. And, I could really, there's a lot to unpack there, right? But I guess I just wanted to start with some of my thoughts on it and what my experience has been like as someone who has not done a whole lot of inking, at least not in a traditional comic book manner. I've inked a lot of my own drawings over the years, but I never really approached it with the kind of, serious outlook that I have towards it now, or understanding. I didn't have the understanding of it that I do now. For example, let's start there, okay? So, when I was a kid, when I was much younger, and I really wanted to be a comic book artist, I loved, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee. I wanted to be like those guys. And to me, those weren't inkers, These comic book artists that were at the top of the heap. They were the most popular comic book artists in the world. But to me, being ignorant of, I guess, what it meant to be a comic book artist, I just thought, oh, those guys are just pencilers, right? I thought that, comic book art, obviously, you got a penciler and an inker. But Todd McFarlane and Jim Lee, these were the guys that were getting all the praise thrown on them. So it's like, well, yeah, that's because, they're the ones drawing the thing. They're the pencilers. Not realizing, of course, at the time that both of them are quite capable of and have done a lot of inking, including other people's work. But I didn't know that at the time. I mean, I looked at Wizard Magazine. If you read Wizard Magazine, you'll remember they always had a top 10 artists list. Of course, those two were regulars on it. And when I saw those lists, what I saw was, names I became familiar with. And they became familiar with them as... these are the guys penciling these comic books, but oftentimes I would see another name on those books, and that would be the inker. But to me, that really didn't mean a whole lot. I guess I didn't put much stock in that. There's the whole tracer. Those guys are just tracers. Which I guess at the time I kind of felt like that was the case, right? Again, total ignorance of the medium in general, really. Not understanding the importance of inking and what inkers do. And that, in fact, a lot of those artists that I revered, were inkers in their own right many times, in many cases, not always. And that's something actually I'd like to get into, not now, but on another video of inkers versus pencilers, and pencilers who ink their own stuff, and why they do. Why are there inkers? Why are there artists who we only really know for their work as inkers, when they very well may be accomplished artists? Inkers are artists, but accomplished, fully well-rounded artists, and maybe even comic book pencilers in their own rights. For example, when I think of big name inkers, Joe Sinnott, for example. Oh, well, okay, there we go. That's another point, right? So Jack Kirby, before I get back to that, Jack Kirby, for example, arguably the most famous comic book artist of all time, was fully capable, and in the early days often inked his own work. But when he was in full production mode at Marvel, he really saw inking, my understanding is, more of a chore than anything. And so, most of Jack Kirby's work that I think we're really familiar with has been inked by somebody else, whether it be Joe Sinnott or Vince Colletta, whomever. And, of course those guys made an impact because I remembered their names. and they inked a lot of work, and they inked a lot of work by Jack Kirby. But do they get the credit that Jack Kirby got for being, you know, the GOAT? Even though they made his pages something that they would not have been otherwise, because their hand is on those pages, their lines. Those Fantastic Four pages with Jack Kirby's art, he wasn't the only one responsible for those. So, so that's, you know, that's part of that, I guess, ignorance I had when I was younger, not really understanding what an inker was, what an inker did, what the purpose of it was. You know, I guess my thought was, well, an inker just has to go in and, you know, because why, you know, can you not just have pencils on a page and then just print that out? And my understanding was that, you know, you couldn't really, at least back in the day, the technology was such that it really wouldn't look good. And yeah, that may very well have been the case. And so that, you know, the inker had to go in and make those lines darker for the printing, for it to work properly for printing. Yeah, that's no doubt part of it, but that's not entirely, that's not the entire story, right? Especially now where, you know, printing technology is much more advanced, and yeah, you can absolutely just make a comic with just pencils, and that has been done. It's been done many times. You can print out a page of just pencils. It looks perfectly fine. You can make out all the lines and the shading and all that. But because there's more to the story there than that, that's why we still do this, right? Because an inker is, and you know, again, I'm gonna say that, but it, you know, whether it's the same artist that does the penciling or not, or whether it's somebody different, they're making the page. Well, you could say that they're making the page. They're making the page what it is. Largely, they're not the only one responsible. You know, you got to give credit to the colorist, to the letter if you want, I suppose. Not really that important, but yeah, it is the ink. It is the inking that really takes it from one level to the next, and it's such an integral part of the medium. Comic books and comic book art would not be the same without it. And you know, if comic books were a pizza, okay, I would say that the pencils are the dough. So the penciler, you know, he makes the dough and rolls it out and flips up in the air and does all that, okay? And then the inking process, that's putting on the sauce and the cheese. You know, because what's a pizza without the sauce and the cheese? It's just dough. It's just flat dough. All right. And then the colorist comes along. You don't necessarily need a colorist, right? Some of my favorite comics of all time are in black and white, and just like my favorite pizza is just cheese pizza, just sauce and cheese. Really, that's all you really need. But if you're so inclined, you want to add some toppings like pepperoni, or anchovies. You know, that's where the colorist comes in. And then, you know, the letterer is like, I guess, the delivery guy. No, I guess that would be the publisher. The distributor would be the delivery guy. The letterer is like the guy that puts the letters on the pizza box. You know, so you know that there's pizza in there and branding and all that. So, you could also just use a plain white box. Everyone knows what a pizza box is. So the letterer, not that important. Anyhow, I'm just kidding, guys. Shout out to all the letterers out there. Where was I? Right, so I'm definitely gonna lose track of thoughts during this, especially when I'm trying to draw, because a big part of this too is just getting used to talking while drawing, which I don't really do a whole lot of. Even when I've gone on other YouTube shows and it's drawing, I don't really talk very much during those, because I do kind of, it's something I still have to get used to, because I kind of just, well, usually when I'm drawing, I'm just have something else going on in the background, whether it's a movie or music or what have you. So this show is going to be a new challenge. See how I can handle that. Juggling the two things at once. And just by saying that, I've already lost my track of thought. Where was I? Oh, yes. So, I guess what all that is to say that I've really grown to out of that ignorance, you know, learning about comic book art, you know, listening to other comic book artists talk, watching tutorials, and specifically inking tutorials, stuff like that is really, my appreciation for the art of inking has grown tremendously, and the respect I have for it, and for inkers and the role that they've played in the history of this incredible medium. And I did want to touch on, you know, because I said inkers a whole bunch of time. I think I said this already, but I don't want to go too deep into that. I'm not going to talk about specific artists or anything. But I would at some point like to kind of do a deep dive on inkers specifically, and kind of, if I can do research, figure out why certain artists kind of followed that path specifically, and why, you know, why do we know these people only as inkers and not as artists in some other respects? You know, like Joe Sinnott, for example. I don't remember if I already said this, but like, I know him, when I hear Joe Sinnott, I think of his work as an inker, and I think of all the pages I've seen that he's inked. But I can't, for the life of me, think of any of his own original work, his own, say, penciled work, or paintings, or whatever it may be, what have you. All I can think of is his inking, and but for all I know, he's quite an accomplished artist in other regards, right? I just don't know. I'm not familiar with that work. Did he pencil comics? He may very well have. I don't know. I just really know him from his work as an inker. So I'd like to do kind of at some point do a deep dive on that. That would be interesting. Oh, that actually reminds me too. Just yesterday, I was in a chat So I was watching Shelby Robertson's live stream. Guys, if you're not familiar with him, go check him out. American Discord, I believe it is, here on YouTube. And he was just doing live stream, doing some inking, as it just so happens. Shelby's an industry veteran, quite an accomplished artist and inker. Believe has inked Rob Liefeld's work in the past. And I mentioned in the chat, I was thinking about one of the things I was kind of wanted to take a look at eventually. For example, is Jim Lee. Okay, do you prefer Jim Lee's work when he's inked it himself? Which of course he's done quite a bit of. There's lots of examples of Jim Lee inking his own work. Versus Jim Lee's work inked by Scott Williams, who of course is his longtime collaborator and inker. And Shelby immediately said Scott Williams, which I'm inclined to agree with. But that may be, is that only because I'm just so much more familiar with Jim Lee's work being inked by Scott Williams? That's the kind of thing I'd like to take a look at eventually. Do sort of a side-by-side comparison, see what what his work is like inked by himself, how his inking style, how Jim Lee's inking style differs from Scott Williams on his own pencils, and do I prefer one to the other? And I just think it's interesting that it would be an interesting kind of little thing to look at, especially given that like I said, inking is a whole art form unto itself, and Jim Lee, is an amazing artist as he is, he might just not be as good working with ink as Scott Williams is. That may really come down to that. Who knows? I'd like to look at that at some point. Which brings me to another point. I think I wanted to make one more point before I actually start talking about this a little bit and what I'm doing. And I don't want to go... I don't think I'm going to finish this. I don't want to go super long with this video. But I will get some of this done here. But one point I kind of wanted to touch on also, since we're on the topic, is how digital art has affected inking. How it has affected the industry in terms of, is there now less work for inkers? Because I don't want to say it's made the process of inking obsolete, although in a way it has. Obsolete's the wrong word. It's just that you see more and more examples of comic books being created digitally. The artwork's all done digitally, which means that you're taking what was at one point, at the very least, a two-step process. Largely, we're talking, we're talking full-scale monthly production books for Marvel or DC, for example. For the longest time, that process was more or less the same across the board, in that you'd pencil pages and and then ink them, and whether that was the same artist or two different artists, that's more or less, how most comic books have been created. And, so being able to draw digitally, I don't want to say it's made it, you can make the argument that it makes it quicker and that it eliminates one part of that two-part process. Because it does, but it doesn't. For example, if I'm working digitally, like with this Spectre piece, I did draw this out on Procreate first. I did a bunch of rough sketches, figured out the layout, what the pose and folds of the robe would look like, and that, spent some time doing that. And then once I more or less had figured out what I wanted it to look like, I could then do, my line drawing, do my line work, kind of block out shadows. But then typically, I would say whatever layer all that's on, I'd lower the opacity of that and do it one more time just to tighten everything up. So, if you say that penciling and inking is kind of doubling one's efforts, I'm still doing that digitally. I'm still drawing the thing more than once. So is it really saving time? I don't know. But I guess what you will see more of, I guess, is that yes, there, and we'll get when I do. I'll do a show soon where I'm working digitally, and yes, of course, there's absolutely advantages to working digitally in terms of overall speed and efficiency. So time saving, sure, absolutely. There's many cases where it's time saving. But I guess the biggest thing is that where once you may have had a separate penciler and separate inker working on a book, if the artist is working digitally, well, there's no need for two people to do that. If they're doing it digitally, it's all essentially one process. Even though it's not really. I don't know if that's confusing. Yeah, so again, I'll probably get into that more as well at a later point when I do more of a deep dive video on inking, and which there will be more to come. That's another thing I'd like to tackle and look at in greater detail. Now, as for what I'm doing here, well, I'm not entirely sure. So as you can see, I've just been working inking these trees here, and I already inked the outline here. I'm just working on these trees, so I've more or less got outlines done, and I'm just starting to throw in some rendering into these trees. And to be honest, I'm not really thinking about it. Now here's the thing with inking where it really is how my prep work for inking, we'll say, how that changes kind of the flow and the process. So especially as I'm, and you know what, I think there's something to be said for what I'm doing right now that I think I kind of like. But so the Spectre drawing that I have here, I would say the pencils were not loose, not tight, somewhere in the middle. The outlines were all more or less all figured out. I have not changed my outlines really much. I kind of just went over what I had. But now we're gonna start to get into the weeds a bit, because the real rough part of my pencils is in the shadows. I have roughly blocked in the shadows, and that's okay, you know, that's gonna be all black, that's not really an issue. The issue is gonna come into the transitions, the areas from where I'm going from those solid blacks into light areas, and those I have done very roughly in pencil. Where I have some hatching here, I may not necessarily hatch that the same way. That's a decision I have to make when I come to it. And so it's kind of, it's something that I'm trying to figure out the balance there with when it comes to penciling. Now, if I was drawing this for someone else to ink, it would be a different story. I would have the pencils much tighter. I would figure out, I don't want to say I would figure out all the hatching necessarily, because again, a good accomplished inker will actually, you know, they're okay, they can figure that out for you, that's what they do. But I would probably just in general tighten everything up a lot more. Whereas because I'm doing it myself, I can leave the pencils much looser, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it means that, you know, I don't have to spend as much time on the penciling, and I can get right into the inking, and I'm fairly impatient sometimes when it comes to that. I want to start getting down to the finished piece. But what it means is that the inking usually will end up taking me longer, because there's things I have not worked out on the page beforehand that I have to figure out during the inking process. And I actually think that is a good thing, because I want this to be fairly loose. I want it to be, in general, I'm trying to work looser, because I think it's better. I think when I've inked stuff in the past, it just feels too tight, too rigid. You can really see I'm too worried about making mistakes and making things, you know, I'm just trying to make things perfect, and that's not really necessary. Now, if there's one tip I have for inking, and this is partly from experience, but also because it's, you know, one of the things I've heard other artists say as well, it's that, you know, that sort of hesitation, I guess, you know, that's a killer. Really, when it comes to being able to make a confident line, you know, a confident line isn't necessarily perfect, but I think it's one that shows there was no hesitation in making that mark, in making that line. And even as I'm looking at this now, I still, you know, I can see that that's there. Though, if I'm being honest, that's more because I'm trying not to lose my train of thought. It really is like juggling here, guys. Trying to remember what I was gonna say while drawing, but I will say I'm feeling fairly loose in how I'm inking this right now, and I think that's important. It's kind of one of the goals. One of the goals I have for my own artwork in general is just to be a bit looser and not worry so much about making mistakes and just enjoy the process. And I think that the end result will actually be better. And the problem I think I've always had with inking, and well, one of two problems. The big one, though, is that the feeling of permanence, the feeling that, oh, if I make a mistake, you know, that sucks, it's ink. But, you know, although it is ink, you know, nothing is permanent, and, you know, that's why we have the whiteout for, you know, it's, you know, anything could be fixed. So it's really just trying to get past that idea that if I make a mistake, you know, just not worry. I'm trying not to worry so much about making a mistake. And, you know, when I'm working, say, on something like this tree, where I don't really have anything planned out, I don't know where those mistakes are gonna be until it's done, because I might ink this whole thing and then I'll see, oh well, I don't really like what happened there, but that's okay because I can always go back and fix it. So it's better to just, again, stay loose and do what I think is right, do what feels right. And if I have to change it afterwards, I can. That's not a big deal. So I'm really trying to, that's really what I'm trying to accomplish in terms of with my inking. There we go. Just as I said that, I already made something I will need to fix, and that's okay. The other thing is that the big challenge I'm having, I guess, with inking, let's say, not the big challenge that I'm having, I guess the challenge I want to have, I guess, is that I'm challenging myself is to be using tools I'm not as well versed in. For example, you know, for many years when I would ink a drawing I liked, you know, I would use a technical pen like these Pigma Microns. If you're an artist, you've probably used them before. They're very popular. These are great pens, but I used to use these all the time. I still use them, absolutely still use them. But these were pretty much the only real pens I used for inking drawings that I did. And they're great, but because they're technical pens, they're all, you know, it's just a single line weight. And yes, there's different thicknesses, but I used to love using very thin technical pens. And like I said, they're great and they have their purpose, but to be able to ink, say, in a traditional comic book style, and I will circle back to line weights in a bit because I don't want to That's actually something I wanted to touch on too. But as I've wanted to improve, I guess, overall as an artist, a big part of that is I want to be able to complete inked drawings that just look better. And for me, that means really kind of pushing myself to use other tools, more, I guess you would say, traditional comic book inking tools, such as brushes and ink and nib pens, and in this case here, brush pens. I'm using a brush pen. But so for me, this is still, I'm still very much getting used to these things, because for so long I really just used technical pens, and for the past 2 years I've pretty much been working mostly digitally, primarily, though I have been drawing traditionally a lot more. I was working digitally a lot. Now, that being said, to go from working on something like Procreate to using, say, brushes and brush pens, I will say that Procreate helped a lot with that, because I'm using very similar brushes in that program, actually. Obviously it's different, not exactly the same thing, but the idea behind them, how you use them, is is very similar. They're based, if you get a basic pen brush in, say, Procreate, it's based on something that does that, right? So I will say that drawing a lot in, at least for me, I think drawing a lot digitally has helped me with actual inking, with an actual brush. I have no doubts about that. But sitting down and doing the real thing, doing it with the real brush and ink, of course, presents its own set of challenges. Immediately realize that, it's similar, but it's definitely not the same thing, in that I can't just, I can't undo like you can digitally. And as I said, it's not permanent, but I still have to fight that feeling that it's permanent. Speaking of the brush pen, I will just mention, because when I watch other artists make videos, I like to know what they're using. I'm just curious, so I'm using, actually for this whole piece I've used, this is a Tombow brush pen, Fudenosuke pen. I have two. One is the soft, this is the soft tip. There's also a hard tip as well. And these are really great pens. I'm really enjoying using them. It is a fairly small tip, but that's kind of what I wanted right now. And I do have a Pentel brush pen here with a much bigger, softer brush. I have not used that on this piece yet. I don't know if I'm going to break that out. This one's got a much steeper learning curve. It's more like an actual brush. Speaking of which, I do have just a beat up old brush here that I'll use just to fill in those areas. But yeah, this is just an old brush. I don't even know what this is. One sort of technique thing I wanted to touch on in this video, and like I said, this is not really a tutorial or anything. This is the whole purpose of this series. If you missed my first video, by no means do you have to go back and watch it. You can, but this is to follow with me along my art journey, which every art YouTuber has said at some point, I'm sure. But guys, if I'm making it sound like I'm a professional comic book artist, I can tell you I am not, at least not in the sense of it's not my day job. I am actually a woodworker by trade. That's what I do. But now I'm working on the wood on these trees with this brush pen here. But no, I do not. I do not work professionally as a comic book artist, but kind of the purpose of this show was, yes, to just have a show about art and show off my art and art process and all that, but also to kind of document this whole process of wanting to become a quote-unquote professional artist and really start being able to at least make some semblance of a living from my art. And you'll see these early kind of videos. Everything I'm going to be doing is working towards that goal, to building up a new portfolio, working on commissions, doing stuff for contests, whatever it may be, just to continue to hone my craft. And yeah, that's what and that's kind of what this is for, to kind of document that process and show you guys, is it possible for a middle-aged man to make it as an artist, for what it's worth, whatever that means. And I'm feeling, I gotta say, I'm feeling like, I don't know, I'm feeling unsure, but I'm also feeling really good about it. And because it's hard, no matter what age you are, no matter what stage you're at, making a living as an artist has never been easy, and I don't think ever will be. But long story short, I have been drawing more or less my whole life, but I went many years where I really didn't take it all that seriously. I would still, I've never really stopped drawing or making art, but I just never, it was really lacked any sort of direction or focus. But that has since changed in the past couple of years. And that is due in no small part to the incredible community of people I've met through, essentially through comic books, the comic book community, people I've met through, Instagram and YouTube, and including a number of really incredible artists, both those working in the industry, or those who just make art for the love of making art, you know, and it's been really, really inspiring, and really, I think really was the catalyst. Meeting these people and other artists and seeing what other people are doing really, really was sort of the catalyst for me to get back into taking art more seriously and wanting to take things in a more serious direction. That combined with the fact that, you know, although I like my job, I don't want to do it forever. And this is really my, you know, this is my true passion. So, yeah. What was I getting at? Yeah, that more or less is what this series, this show is all about in terms of why I'm doing it. Just to it's another piece of the puzzle, I suppose. I think it's going to help. I think it's actually going to help me grow as an artist as well. In that, actually documenting the process of making the artwork, which is something I've never really looked at or paid attention to. Whereas this way, I can actually go back and see what, you know, if I have a finished piece, I can actually go back and see exactly what I did to get there, because, you know, it's I think that could have some, that could place, certainly has a role to play, sure. Who knows, maybe not, maybe I'm talking out of my ass, but either way, I still wanted to do this. But where was I? Yeah, so right, I was going to speak on the one thing I wanted to speak on in terms of technique, and that's where I think I lost my train of thought, was that when it comes to inking technique, I'm still very much learning so much about it myself. I am by no means an inking master, far from it. But in my exploration of tools, especially, I gotta say, brush pens have been kind of a revelation for me, because as I said, I was really just using technical pens and microns, and of course I've tried inking with a brush in the past. That's incredibly difficult, but that is something that I want to work on as well. Brush pens are a different story. I would say they can definitely be a little more forgiving than a brush, or at least I find the learning curve is not as steep with a brush pen, typically because, like with these, I say that, but that's not entirely true, because like the Pentel brush pen is almost as tricky to use as a brush. It's a very soft tip. I just find the transition, because a brush pen like these Tombos, it's a very stiff, even the soft one has a very stiff tip, and so it is much more like using a pen, a regular pen. But one key difference, and this is what I was getting to, was the line weight. And, you know, my trusty microns that I used for years and years, and I still love, but, you know, when you make a line, you're just getting whatever the thickness of that pen is. In this case is an 03. There's lots of different thicknesses, of course, and of course you can build that up as much as you want, and but a brush pen, very different story, because you can go from that thick to thin. And when you're talking about traditional, when I say traditional, what do I mean? I have no idea. But when I think of comic book inking, comic book art, Jack Kirby, for example, and whoever was inking him, if you look at Jack Kirby's pencils, you could tell that he was an inker as well, because he penciled. He kind of penciled like an inker. He definitely penciled with the inks in mind, and there is that difference between the line weights going from thick to thin, and we can make a whole video on that, and how to utilize line weight to define form, to define light and shadow, to push things forward, pull things forward, or push things into the background. How to you can do all that simply by varying your line weight. And that's where brushes and brush pens and even nib pens excel at that variation in line weight. And I think when most people think of comic book art, traditional comic book art, that's what I mean by that, is like the line weight varies. And I don't think I really have to say much more about that. You have eyes, you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And I've listened to other I guess comic book artists, and talking about that, and the importance of especially when it comes to inking, let's say. Really, one of the keys to becoming a better inker in general is really practicing. I'd have to agree with this, although I don't do it much, is practicing, doing basic exercises where you're practicing going from, thin to thick, and thin again, practicing those variations in line weight, and, just as an exercise to get used to the tool, whether it be a brush or a brush pen. Very true. But then you have to figure out, once you are used to that, you have to figure out, well, what goes where? Where does the thick part go? Where does the thin part go? And in general, I'm not going to go into that right now. Again, you could do a whole video on that, and there's a lot of really great tutorials on that sort of thing that will be much more valuable to me than anything I have to say. I mean, go check out any of David Finch's tutorials are amazing, but there's another inker, his name escapes me, who does amazing inking tutorials. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. I want to get into the opposite of that, actually, which is that for all the truth there is in that, yes, learning how to vary your line weight, learning where to make lines thick to pull things into the foreground, where to make them thin to push them into the background, where to how you can use that to build up form, and you know, create shading, all that. That's all fine and well and very true. But, and you know, you know, a lot of comic book art is kind of defined by that. But it's not the be all end all, and is it absolutely necessary in order to be an amazing comic book artist, to be an amazing inker? Are you required to draw things like that? Absolutely not. And I'm taking my time getting to my point here, but that's because I'm getting lost in the sauce, guys. This is I'm actually just really enjoying drawing these tree branches and forgetting to talk what it was I'm talking about. But as I'm you know, as I am kind of varying my line with a little bit. Because these are such stiff brush pens, the variation in line weight requires, you know, to thicken your line, it takes more pressure. So why I like these is they stay relatively thin until you really apply pressure on them. But that's not what I was gonna say. What I was gonna say was, that is absolutely not necessary to create amazing comic book art. You absolutely 100% can create incredible comic books with nothing more than a single line weight. You can use one pen, one single technical pen like this, to create really incredible and captivating artwork. And there's lots of proof for that. And that is all of the artists whose style is kind of been defined by the fact that their artwork is really, it's really a single line weight throughout all of their drawings. They almost never vary their line weight, their line thickness. And a few examples would be Steve McNiven. He's one. Steve Dillon is another one. And then I think probably one of the best examples would be Moebius. Moebius, without a doubt, one of the greatest comic book artists ever, and definitely one of my favorites. To my understanding, pretty much just used a pen. I don't know, I think he probably used a nib pen, but regardless, if you look at Moebius's artwork, very little variation in line weight or width. It's pretty much all one single line weight throughout all his stuff. And you know, same with you know, Steve Dillon's another good example. Martin Marazzo does Ice Cream Man, another good example. There's lots of other artists. I can't think of at the moment, but take a look and you'll see exactly what I mean. They're really just drawing with that one single line weight, but creating incredible art and incredible comic books, and but building, you know, of course, I guess I would say maybe the risk you run doing that is making it look too cartoony, because animation and cartoons are not necessarily all a single line weight, but they can, I think that can, you look at like something like The Simpsons, let's say, the animation in that, it all is kind of like all one single line weight, line width. So you might run the risk of maybe looking a bit too much like a cartoon doing that. But, you know, all those guys, Mobius, Steve McNiven, through, you know, other techniques, through hatching, stippling, whatever it may be, are able to build up form and shadow and all of that. But yeah, they never, they don't do this thick, thin thing, right? That's just a long-winded way of saying that, and just an observation I had, right? Those are some of my favorite artists in comic books, and I've always really loved their style, and it's a style that really the defining feature of it is, yeah, they're just they don't vary their line weight like at all. I think Brian Boland as well would be another one. He, yeah, maybe he does a little bit, but I think for the most part also is like using like a single line weight. Yeah. So that's all that's really all I wanted to say on that. It's just, and it's another way of doing things. That's one way of drawing that. Man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could draw like those guys, because I was talking about, you know, the confidence in line work when inking. Man, it really takes a lot of confidence to be able to draw like that, because when you're just doing one single, you know, thin line, that's another thing. It's not like these guys are using Sharpies. They're using fairly thin pens, it looks like, for the most part. So there is no way to really hide any mistakes or errors in those lines, because it's not like if I do this line here and I go, oh, I don't like the way that looks, but you know what, this is a tree, and the way I'm drawing this is like, I can just go back over that or whatever and be like, oh, that's okay, I fixed that. Whereas if your whole style is defined by a single thin line and you don't like that line, it's like, well, too bad. You've either got to cover it up and do it again, or you got to live with that. There's no way to hide anything. So I really admire and respect that style and that way of working. And oftentimes, and again, and it's like, that's the thing, is like, with like Mobius or Steve McNiven or Frank Quitely's another one. Frank Quitely's a great example, who I think maybe, I don't know if he just always does like a single line weight thing, but he does something very similar to that. But like him or Steve McNiven and Martin Morazzo as well, they have a real squiggly line that I really like, but I feel like I really like that because it feels very natural, and I think that just comes out of the fact that they're not robots. Right? And so if you're drawing a whole comic book with a single thin line, it's not gonna be absolutely perfect every time, and you wouldn't want it to be. And so that kind of, I like how you you see it in their line that like looks very handmade. You can tell that you know, I mean, you can see there's like a confidence in that squiggly line. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's there. Yeah, so I don't know what else I want to say in this video. Anything else? I'm not so sure. Got a little bit of work done here on this. Yeah, and I think that's I think I'm gonna wrap it up for this video. But I hope it wasn't too much of a train wreck. It will. This show is going to improve as it goes along. I'm still not entirely sure what I'm doing. You know, it's an experiment. It's a work in progress. The show's going to evolve as I go along. You know, some episodes might just be me drawing and then I record the audio later. That's probably gonna be a lot easier for me. I think I might try and do that next time, because this one, it's been more just kind of stream of consciousness kind of thing. I didn't write anything down. I just kind of decided to start inking and start talking, and then this is where we ended up. And I appreciate any of you who've watched, and really appreciate if anyone made it all the way through. That's you're a trooper. But yeah, I think I'm gonna end this here, and yeah, I think next episode I'll probably go over some of my goals, my art goals for 2024, and my goals for this channel, or this show anyhow. And yeah, I think that'll do it, guys. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think about any of this. I don't know, whatever. It's the comments. You can comment whatever the hell you want. I'll read them. And yeah, have a happy new year, and I will see you next time.